This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans! It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Every wrestling fan knows about 1997's Montreal Screwjob, while others may know about 1985's The Original Screwjob. However, did you know about a far earlier double cross? Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at wrestling's original double cross. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. In the interest of transparency, Wrestling's Greatest Moments research can't rule out previous double crosses, especially given pro wrestling's seedy nature. However, this appears to be the first so-called screwjob involving a world championship in a worked match. The Goldust Trio. While the original National Wrestling Alliance is often thought of as the wrestling equivalent of organized crime in terms of protected territories and agreements to blacklist wrestlers who didn't follow the rules, there were wrestling syndicates long before the NWA. One such syndicate would later become known as the Goldust Trio, made up of wrestler strangler Ed Lewis, wrestler-turned-promoter Billy Sandow, and wrestler Joseph Toots Mondt. The Goldust Trio forged a powerful force in wrestling. Mondt, a skilled wrestler trained by pioneer-era legend Martin Farmer Burns, is often credited with transforming the way wrestling worked. Mondt ditched pro wrestling's typical mix of worked and legitimate matches. The problem was legitimate contests could often be exceptionally long and boring with little action. Both wrestlers feared making a mistake, so the matches were often stalemates. Imagine seeing two wrestlers in a collar and elbow tie-up for 2 to 4 hours. Not an exciting spectator sport. Consequently, all matches on the show were then worked. In addition, Mondt added more matches to cards. Whereas shows previously might have 2 matches, Toots Mondt expanded them to 2 or 3, with Zimmerman noting this added variety and increased the chance a fan might be interested in at least one match on the card. In his memoir, Hooker, legendary wrestler Lou Thesz claims Mondt was the one who suggested that speeding up matches, setting time limits, and introducing more spectacular moves would attract paying customers. Toots was responsible for adding another wrinkle to the game that is still in existence today. Wrestling is a package show. In fact, it was probably his greatest contribution. Thesz describes how Toots' idea was that it made a lot more sense economically to handle the business much like a vaudeville show. Maintain a stable of wrestlers and stage the bouts as a package, replacing some of the talent every so often to keep things fresh. Professional wrestling was growing in the 1920s, expanding from Midwest shows to other parts of the United States. At the time, promoters shared the world champion. Much as the National Wrestling Alliance would later do, a promoter in New York City could run a show with his wrestlers and headline it with the world champion. The promoter would then give 10% of the gate to the world champion, inevitably making one of his wrestlers look good against the world champ, even if he lost. However, the members of the Goldust Trio decided 10% wasn't enough. Now that their man Strangler Ed Lewis was champion, they changed the rules. The trio set up a 50-50 gate split. The trio got 50% of the gate, which Sandow used to pay the wrestlers. The rest was their profit. The promoter used his 50% for overhead and advertising. The rest was his profit. In addition, Sandow demanded that shows only feature his wrestlers. This shortchanged regional promoters because fans didn't get to see the promoter's own talent, denying them the opportunity to get them over for shows when the world champion wasn't in town. Needless to say, promoters weren't happy with the Goldust Trio's new stranglehold on wrestling. Chief among them, promoter Jack Curley. Curley was a powerful figure in wrestling who had built a wrestling empire based around New York City. Curley was no fool and bided his time as he concocted one of the most outrageous double crosses during the 1920s. A move that would change the way pro wrestling was promoted for decades. The next big thing. Wayne Munn was the type of wrestler Vince McMahon would have lost his mind over. Munn was a former college football player who had also served in World War I as a member of the Army Reserves. That was good window dressing, but his real appeal was that he was a physical specimen. Munn stood at 6'5" or 6'6", and promoter Billy Sandow saw Wayne Munn as a license to print money. Today it's common to see pro football players drift into professional wrestling, but in the early 1920s, pro football itself was looked down upon. Newspaper editors and college officials blasted it as a cheap commercialization of the college game, a sport held up as pure, physical, and honorable. College athletes, they insisted, played for the love of competition, not for something so mundane as money. Professional football, by contrast, was seen as sketchy at best. The idea of men playing for money was often framed as unseemly, even un-American. So a pro football player entering wrestling didn't really mean much. But a college football star? That was different. When an amateur standout crossed over into what promoters proudly called the sport of kings, it gave pro wrestling a borrowed legitimacy, just enough to make skeptics stop laughing and start paying attention. Munn had zero amateur wrestling skills and had to be protected every time he stepped into the ring. That meant short matches and putting him against opponents who knew what was in their best interest, i.e., putting Munn over. Lewis and Mont taught Munn how to work a plausible match, but Munn could not actually wrestle. Lewis told Sandow that a mediocre wrestler would defeat Munn in a legitimate contest. Mont warned Sandow that anyone could double-cross Munn and take the world title. As we'll see, Mont and Lewis had every reason to expect a double cross, and a double cross they would get. The double cross. The Goldust Trio were riding high in the 1920s. Nonetheless, their success had come at the expense of wrestling's most powerful promoter at the time, Jack Curley. Curley, a promoter entrenched in the Northeast, had built up a network of wrestling promotions that worked with him. More importantly, Curley had established a network of state athletic commissions that were favorable to him. Pro wrestling was still considered a legitimate sport, and while people had their doubts, individual states ruled on who could book shows. As a result, someone who might have allies in a state athletic commission could keep rival wrestling shows out of their area. In addition, the State Athletic Commission could render a match null and void, a convenient situation when matches might turn from a work into a shoot, something which would play out after the double cross. The Goldust Trio had done their best to keep Curley's group out of the loop, bleeding the once mighty man white. Curley had spent years promoting, and while he was seemingly finished, the trio made the mistake of underestimating him. First, Curley called out Wayne Munn, delivering a list of 10 wrestlers from his organization who he said could beat the world champion. The Goldust Trio knew better than to put Munn into the ring against a rival promoter's wrestlers. At the same time, the Goldust Trio knew they had to cement Munn's reputation as a legitimate wrestler, even though they knew he wasn't. This led to Sandow booking a match featuring his wrestler Stanislaus Zbyszko against Munn. Stanislaus was a highly skilled competitor whose best years might have seemed behind him, but he was still capable of going toe-to-toe with any legitimate wrestler, and his reputation as a former world champion gave instant stroke to anyone who beat him. Furthermore, Sandow trusted Zbyszko. Sandow intended to have Zbyszko put Munn over in a couple of big matches, proving Munn a legitimate champion. Stanislaus Zbyszko put Munn over on February 11, 1925, dropping 2 consecutive falls to Big Munn. Zbyszko was booked for a repeat performance on April 15th, but in a dramatic reversal, Munn learned the double cross of all double crosses had occurred. Stanislaus turned into his green opponent, winning the first fall in 8 minutes and 11 seconds, and the second in 4 minutes and 53 seconds. Jack Curley emerged from the shadows to push Zbyszko to win the title, and the deed was executed flawlessly. The 3-year reign of Lewis and Sandow at the top was over. What motivated Stanislaus to go into business for himself may never be known. However, wrestling lore has it that Jack Curley offered Zbyszko $50,000 to throw the match. According to historian John Langmead, it's impossible to know what really was behind Zbyszko's decision, but within a week of his win, Curley was making plans for a championship match between him and Joe Stetcher. Zbyszko's guarantee for the match was exactly $50,000. Pride may also have played a role in Zbyszko's decision for one last hurrah. The burly wrestler's career was interrupted during World War I, when he was imprisoned by Russian forces for nearly 6 years. He eventually returned to the United States, rebuilding his career, but at the cost of frequently putting over opponents for promoter Billy Sandow. To make things worse, reporters referred to Zbyszko as the old man, despite him only being in his mid-40s. Whatever the motive for Zbyszko's betrayal, the Goldust Trio were reminded of a motto wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin would adopt for his character: don't trust anybody. The fallout, the double cross, was something any promoter wise to the business should have foreseen. Sandow's colleagues warned him against it, but they eventually gave in. But why? The group was making money hand over fist, so why would they risk a good thing, as far as historian Tim Hornbaker is concerned? Despite having solid thinkers plotting the course, the Lewis-Sandow core were blinded by greed and overlooked the fact that Munn was new to wrestling. Zbyszko had beat Munn in the ring, but Sandow wasn't ready to quit. Promoters had power with different athletic commissions, so Billy Sandow exerted his influence with a couple of commissions. The Illinois and Michigan athletic commissions refused to recognize Zbyszko's title win. Ed Strangler Lewis defeated Munn in Michigan in May 1925 to claim the Illinois and Michigan versions of the world title. The world title would be split, with two promoters claiming their champion was the legitimate champion. The double cross divided the world championship until Lewis and Stetcher agreed to a contest in St. Louis in February 1928. The divided championship hurt wrestling at the box office, forcing the two groups to settle their feud. Going forward, promoters wouldn't make this mistake again. Future world champions would be men with backgrounds as shooters or hookers, capable of defending themselves against nearly anyone should an opponent decide to steal a championship. While there would be occasional exceptions, such as Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, who was no cream puff but nothing close to a shooter or hooker like Lou Thez, promoters would assign policemen to protect champions who were more showmen than wrestlers. Although Munn's wrestling career is a footnote in the sport's history, there's no denying how much his title reign and shocking loss affected the era. Munn entertained the fans with an exciting style, but his inability to defend himself in legitimate contests highlighted the dangers of a non-wrestler as champion. Munn retired from wrestling, dying from a kidney ailment on January 9, 1931, at age 34. The Goldust Trio would continue promoting until splitting up in 1928. Billy Sandow continued managing wrestlers, passing away on September 15, 1972, at age 88. Strangler Ed Lewis retired from wrestling in 1947, but stayed active in the business, managing his trainee, Lou Thez. Lewis passed away on August 7, 1966, at age 76. As for Toots Mondt, he remained a powerful force in the industry, eventually mentoring Vince McMahon Sr. and helping form the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Joseph Toots Mondt died on June 11, 1976, at age 82. Did you know about this early wrestling double cross? Would you like us to cover others? Share your thoughts in the comment section and let us know if there are any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.